Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. O'Neill. Today I'm going to talk about the phonology of Betsimisaraka Malagasy. That's a language spoken in Madagascar. So when you picture Madagascar, what you might picture is the famous children's movie Madagascar, but today we'll be talking about the real Madagascar. That's an island off the east coast of Africa where the Malagasy languages are spoken. Betsimisaraka is one of those languages that's spoken on the east coast of the island. Here you can see some pictures I took when I was there, and that's my personal connection to the languages. I was there studying the language, gathering some of the data I'll talk about today. Specifically today, I'm going to talk about Betsimisaraka phonology. We'll talk about the sound inventory. We'll focus on the alveolar affricates, s and z, and then we'll look at those affricates in a Fortition process and compare that to English. The inventory of Betsimisaraka includes 5 vowel phonemes, the cardinal vowels, not too unusual. So let's move on to looking at the consonants of Betsimisaraka. I have a few things to say about these. If you look in the liquid column, you'll see they use a flap as their R sound, similar to Spanish and some other languages you speak. It has that velar nasal, or engma as we call it. This actually differentiates it from other kinds of Malagasy. It has post-alveolar affricates, ch and j, just like English does. But today I want to really look at these alveolar affricates, ts and z. So in the Betsimisaraka language, we hear ts in the word si, which means not, and we hear z in the word jiaby, which means all. The process I want to look at for affricates is when we see 2 consonants one after the other, when there's a pair of consonants. And in Betsimisaraka and related languages, the second consonant in a pair is always a stop or affricate. And so we can look at that making compounds with kilon, which can be understood as kilogram of. So when we combine kilon with sira, which means salt, so we're saying a kilogram of salt, we actually don't say kilon sira, we say kilon sira. So that voiceless alveolar fricative S is pronounced instead as a voiceless alveolar affricate s. You can see a similar thing happening with kilon combined with zarko, which means beans. They don't say kilon zarko, they say kilon zarko. So that voiced alveolar fricative is pronounced as a voiced alveolar affricate. Also, we can see it when we combine kilon with ranu, which means water, but they don't say kilon ranu, they say kilon janu. So that post-alveolar liquid is pronounced instead as a post-alveolar affricate. A final example I'll show you is when we combine kilon with vari, which means rice, but they don't say kilon vari. The V is pronounced as a B, so that voiced labial fricative is pronounced as a voiced labial stop. Another thing that happens that we can't talk about today is that N becomes a M, but I hope you can see that now we have labials together in that pair. Some other ones that consonants that undergo fortition, F becomes P, L becomes D, and similar to Spanish, there's an H sound that's not pronounced in Betsimisaraka, but when it undergoes fortition, when fortition happens, it is pronounced, and it's pronounced as K. So looking at this chart, we can sort of generalize here that all fricatives and liquids are pronounced as a stop or an affricate at the same place of articulation when they follow another consonant. This is a type of fortition, which is when sounds become stronger. We can actually compare this to English. We don't exactly have the same process, but S and Z do undergo a sort of fortition in English. So in Betsimisaraka, we heard S was pronounced S after N. Well, in English, if you compare these cases where an S falls in N, you can't hear any difference between them. Chance and chance, prince and prince, they sound the same. And it also happens with Z. So Z is pronounced Z after N. So if you look at pairs like bands, bands, or lens, lens, they should sound the same. So today we talked about the phonology of Betsimisaraka Malagasy. Its inventory has familiar vowels and consonants, especially to Spanish or English. It does have those post-alveolar affricates, ch and j, that we know from English and Urdu and Bangla and similar to Spanish and Twi, but it also has alveolar affricates, and we heard those in this Fortition process where we had two consonants in a row, and the second one is a stop or an affricate, like we heard in Sira versus Kilon Sira. We saw a similar example in English with sane versus insane, where that T sound is heard. So I hope this comparison between English and Betsimisaraka makes an unknown language look more accessible, and hopefully it can inspire you to want to know more about Betsimisaraka and other varieties of Malagasy.